Hi there, welcome to another edition of 411 Pop Culture. This is your host, Justin Steele. Today we are going to be talking about one of my all-time favorite shows, and I think one of the all-time great shows, 6 Feet Under. This show centers on a family living in a funeral home, led by patriarch Nathaniel Fisher Sr. His company is called Fisher & Sons. He has a wife named Ruth, youngest daughter Claire, and the sons, Nathaniel Jr., Nate, and David. David is in the business. Nate kind of skedaddled on out of there because the idea of working with dead bodies creeped him out. But the pilot episode, he is coming back to visit for Christmas. His dad is going to pick him up at the airport and meets with an untimely demise. And that is how each episode begins of this series. At the beginning of each episode, somebody dies. And sometimes this has a very prominent feature or guest actor to kind of make a point to the main characters, and sometimes you never hear about this death again. The family has a juxtaposition with another family, the Chenoweths. At the airport in the pilot episode, Nate meets Brenda, the eldest daughter of the Chenoweths, who is an off-the-charts genius, and whereas the Fishers are very introverted, keep their emotions inside and buried deep, no pun intended, the Chenoweths are a family of psychologists and psychiatrists who overanalyzed everything. Also joining the family is Rico, who is a very talented and renowned restorative artist who helps with the more major reconstructions to the deceased. Now, this show premiered in the early 2000s, and I think I came in about episode 3 or 4, whichever one the foot is. I'm pretty sure it's episode 3. And I was hooked. I had never seen anything like this, and I thought it was just fantastic. The themes that are explored, at the beginning of each episode, somebody dies, and like I said, you have no idea whether they are going to be kind of a part of the episode. Sometimes the main characters talk to the deceased, which is really just a reflection of their own thoughts and anxieties. It makes one think about all the things going on in their lives. It shows how we basically we are born and we die, and everything in between is just static. And the ultimate message of the show is to live your life, because we are all going to end up in the same place. One of the main things that drew me into the show, and performances in this show are out of this world. The character of Brenda hooked me in first, played by Rachel Griffiths. She is Brenda Chenoweth. She is 100% her own person. She's not always right, but she is very observant and insightful. She's an off-the-charts genius, and because of that, she intimidates some of the other characters. She's not traditional, whereas Nate constantly fears death. I bring up Nate because, or their relationship, it was what links the two families together. And Nate he is not particularly spiritual, but he is always seeking out a more deeper meaning to life, whereas Brenda just kind of, she accepts that we are all going to die, and that's it. One episode she says, Nate ponders about how he is worried about dying, and he asks her, don't you ever worry about dying? And she says, I've been prepared to die since I was 5 years old. After I learned about and read about the atomic bomb, I realized every day we're alive, we're lucky. So she was definitely a different character on TV, somebody to challenge more traditional beliefs and make you think. And the other characters, though, very much attracted me. Ruth, played by Frances Conroy, is the most amazing mother, because she's not always the most amazing mother. She's for so long, she's repressed everything, all her emotions and feelings, and in the prior year to her husband's death, she was having an affair, and it was like the first time in her entire life, and she's in her mid-50s, that she has ever done something that was more just for her and not for her family. And as much as she loves her family, I think she sometimes resents the family, especially because they don't always respond the way she thinks they should respond. So sometimes Ruth will be keeping it all together, and then somebody says something and it just makes her snap, and she will throw a frying pan or scream out of nowhere. It's just, an amazing performance. One thing after another. You just never know what to expect out of Ruth. And then youngest daughter Claire, Lauren Ambrose. She is the sort of outcast at school. What actually hooked me to the series was the character of Brenda, but Claire, first episode I watched was called The Foot, and to get back at a guy that told everybody that she not only slept with him, but that she sucked his toes, a dismembered foot was left on the floor by accident in the funeral home, and she swiped that foot up and put it in his locker, and I thought that was a really funny way to get revenge. And that's Claire, she's an artist, she's seeking to figure out herself, and while the show isn't necessarily designed that way, if you go back to watch it a second or third time, all the characters go on a sort of journey and they're all learning something, but Claire, she starts, I think she's about 17 years old, progresses until she's about 22. And in the show, it's her sort of growth throughout that she's the character that's finding herself the most. Then you have Nate, again, who's very spiritual, looking for meaning to life. He's sort of, even though he's ran away from the life as a funeral director, he is the one who is the most in touch with other people's emotions, which is obviously an important trait to have when you're dealing with people who had just lost a loved one. And then there is David, played by Michael C. Hall, who went on to Dexter fame. He is the closeted son who stayed with the family business, who is slowly coming out and exploring a relationship with Keith, played by Matthew St. Patrick, who is a cop and is out but can be very aggressive. But he is also, slowly finding his way. David is slowly finding his way to have a relationship with Keith, be himself, and come to terms with, he always said he wanted to go to law school, but he realizes that the family business is where he belongs. In addition to strong performances, another reason to love the show would be the fantasy sequences. These characters can be very repressed, and sometimes the only way to achieve some sort of fulfillment in their life is through fantasy. Now, each character at one point or another has some sort of fantasy to embrace a certain situation or find understanding, whether it be with the lingering ghost of a recently deceased or whoever died in the episode. But sometimes it's just to get through the more mundane aspects of life. The characters who have the most entertaining, I think, fantasy sequence would be Ruth, David, and Claire. Some of my top three, I think, favorite sequences are when Ruth, at one point, she has a little bit of clarity on some of the men she has been dating, and at one point she has just had enough, and she fantasizes that she is like in a shooting gallery with a shotgun at a carnival, and one by one the guys pop up and say one line to kind of demonstrate what they did in their relationship. From The Office fame, Rain Kelly was a guest star, a reoccurring role on 6 Feet Under, and he and Ruth like to engage in a little nubbing thing, and he says at one point, like, he pops up and says, "I care for you, let's rub heads together." And Ruth smiles, pulls the shotgun, and shoots him down. And in the context, it's really funny. Another episode, one of my other favorites, is with Claire, after she has just had what she thought was a very memorable experience with Gabe, her boyfriend at the time. She walks downstairs, and Ruth asks her, "How is she?" And she just bursts out into song. It's only happening in her head, but Lauren Ambrose, currently starring on Broadway, has an amazing voice, so she burst into a rendition of What a Little Moonlight Can Do, and it's just fantastic. Another episode, David is just vacuuming and completely bored and nothing really going on in his life, and in his head he's singing from Bye Bye Birdie, "You've got a lot of living to do," which also has a little pun, play on words. You have a lot of living to do, and he ends with, "You're alive." It's super funny, just like all the fantasy sequences, makes the show worth watching. Another interesting aspect of the show are the situations that are in context to the show that the characters find themselves in, such as Jeremy Sisto, who plays Billy, Brenda's brother, and James Cromwell, who plays George Sibley, one of the many men in Ruth's life. And they both have been suffering from mental illness. In the show, it's usually taken very seriously and it can be very intense, and it's a very interesting moment on a series that explores everything, which is in and of itself is a great reason to watch the show. But the two characters are both suffering from mental illness, and they sort of examine in a playful way their own issues to each other. So where often these two characters have trouble communicating effectively with the sane members of the cast, they find a sort of connection with each other, and it's just brilliant where Billy and Billy and George are discussing their various meds that they're on, the problems that they've had, but in the context of the situation, it's humorous, and they even start to sing. Mama sang tenor, Daddy played bass. I think I got that backwards, but they start singing that together, and it would be bizarre and weird for anybody else, but in the moment, it's perfect and works excellently for the two of them. And then they end with Billy gets up, George gets up, and he's been suffering from electric shock treatments. And he says, and it's Nate's birthday, but he reaches over to Billy and says, "Happy birthday." And they kind of look at each other, and he goes, "Oh, I mean, it's nice to see you." And it's just funny and touching and hilarious and fascinating because it's not something you'd see just regularly on TV. Another interesting situation is when David has been dating this younger guy. The guy gives him ecstasy. David is hungover from the night before, holding the pills in his hands. He doesn't want Claire to see him. He puts them in an aspirin bottle, and inadvertently, Ruth, his mother, takes the pills. And it's an interesting sequence of Ruth being on ecstasy because you think it's going to be Claire that you were going to follow. Ends up being Ruth, the most unlikely of all the characters to ever take drugs. Another amazing aspect of the show is each opening sequence. They are done brilliantly. Each one is unique. Sometimes it's simple, sometimes it's intricate, but each one is fascinating and comments on how death can happen at any time, anywhere, and will happen to everyone. Some of my favorite or the opening death sequences are when one woman runs out into the middle of the street because a truck that was carrying blow-up dolls became loose, and these dolls all float up into the air, and she believes it's the rapture, so she runs out into the street and gets hit by an oncoming car. Another interesting one is a porn actress who just recently rescued a stray cat. She is taking a bath, talking to the cat about the new love in her life, and the cat accidentally knocks over her curling iron stuff, and it falls right into the bathtub, electrocuting her. And the rest of the episode focuses on accepting who you are as a person, and all these people from the porn industry are coming in, and it can be very humorous, but they're all very touched by her, no pun intended, and celebrate who she was as a person despite what more mainstream society might consider of her. She proclaims that she was in love with every man that she had ever been with. And, it's not up to anybody else to judge her. Another episode, the show premiered only a few years after the death of Matthew Shepard, and an opening death, a hate crime is committed against a young gay man who is at an ATM with his partner. They give each other a hug, and two guys pull up and attack them, and it results in the death of one of them, which this episode very much affects David's character. But each death opening sequence is unpredictable. You never know what you're going to get. It can be silly, it can be serious. One episode is set up to look almost like a slasher movie, and then you find out you are just watching a slasher movie, and how the death is going to happen is completely unexpected. Sometimes they're true to life, but they're just as interesting to watch as the show itself, and again, is a reminder to how death can happen to anybody at any time, any place. I am a big fan of horror movies. I think as this continues on, most of you will become aware of that. I like all genres and I enjoy many, many things, but I always enjoy a nice suspenseful atmosphere. And while that's not the main genre I would fit 6 Feet Under in, it does deal with death though, which is obviously a big part of the slasher genre. However, the show itself, though, because you become so attached to these characters, have very significant moments of terror. And the terror is done very well. One scene, without giving away too much, one scene between Billy and Brenda gets very intense. They both have these matching tattoos that is a symbol of their childhood, and Billy is slowly losing his mind and decides to remove his and gets in the notion that he has to remove Brenda's too. Another episode, again, without giving away any real spoilers, involves David in the episode. He gets himself into a situation that is very intense, and the episode in question takes a different path than any other episode before or after in the series. The way the episode is set up is horrifying, and in a show where death happens every single episode, you do get to fear about what is going to happen to this character. It's just intense and amazing, and for a show that is packed with such intense and amazing drama and comedy, to have these elements of terror that get in there put it on a whole different level. The final reason to watch 6 Feet Under is for the most amazing, and in my opinion, and I think I'm right about this, the best series finale to a show of all time. The way the show ends, I won't give away any spoilers. The way the show ends, though, it is built into the series. The way they do it can only be done in a show like this, without it being contrived or, arbitrarily placed, tacked in the end. The show takes these characters on a complete journey and is just fascinating to watch. It stuns me today how many people have not seen 6 Feet Under. Not just younger generations, but people my age or older when the show was at their prime. They haven't seen it. And I just think it's one of the most amazing shows, so thought-provoking, poignant, and brilliant. And you have these amazing performances. You have very interesting situations, fantasies that will make you crack up laughing, other moments that will have you wide-eyed in fear, and you'll have a complete story where, a lot of shows, I'm very much against cliffhanger endings. I do not like them. I'm fine if you want to go from one season to the next with one or two little open-ended questions, but I believe firmly that each season should end with a complete story, because all the time, even shows that are like, top of the line, get canceled. Some of my big ones were My So-Called Life, or we sort of got a recap of Twin Peaks, but for many years, what we had at the end was what we had at the end of Twin Peaks Season 2. And countless other shows I can go on that just ended before they should have. And I feel like each season of 6 Feet Under always told a complete story, and the series itself as well does, in leading into one of the greatest of all series finales. So I just think if you haven't watched 6 Feet Under, it's currently available on Amazon Prime, or you can still get copies of the complete series on DVD. It's just, you won't regret it. I recently, I let somebody borrow my complete collection a couple weeks ago, and then we discovered at work that somebody else was randomly watching it, and it was great because I felt like I was 20 years old again, watching 6 Feet Under for the first time, and talking to friends about it. In fact, some of my friendships started by watching 6 Feet Under. It's just one of those shows that you'll never quite forget. And I don't think there can ever really be another show quite like it again. I think other shows have tried. Many finales after 6 Feet Under also tried to have a similar finale, but again, the way the show was designed, this sort of finale was already built into the show. So thank you for watching. Please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Comment below if you agree with me or disagree with me. What are some of your favorite death sequences from 6 Feet Under? Who are your favorite characters? Brenda being my favorite. A lot of people always disagreed with me back in the day, so I'd be curious to hear if you do or don't or whatever. But thank you for watching 411 Pop Culture. I'm your host, Justin Steele. This is where real people talk about really everything. Thanks a lot.